The traditional view of intelligence goes back about 100 years, and it consists of a number of points. First of all, intelligence is a single thing. Psychologists use the English letter G to describe general intelligence. Intelligence is highly heritable. That means it's carried in the human genes. So if you know how smart your parents are, or even better, if you know how smart your grandparents are, you can predict how smart you will be. Since it's part of the human genome, you can't do much about it. You are stuck with your general intelligence. Now, these are all views that I disagree with. I don't think this view is correct, but you can understand a new view better if you contrast it with the former view. Now, what's interesting is this traditional view of intelligence is a Western view, Europe and the Americas. If you go to East Asia, China, Japan, Korea, you get a very different view, a Confucian view, which says that how smart you are depends primarily on your effort, how hard you work. About 30 years ago, I began to develop an entirely different way of thinking about intelligence. Not based on paper and pencil test, not based upon looking at brain waves, but rather an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approach which focused on how abilities have evolved over thousands and even millions of years, how the brain has evolved, and how it's organized today in human beings. What are the different abilities which were valued in pre-literate times, in small clans in East Africa and in the South Seas and at the Arctic Pole? What do we know from special populations? Prodigies, savants, idiosavants, people with autism, all of whom have very jagged profiles. They're good in some things, average in some things, below average in some things. There's no way that the traditional view of intelligence can explain this kind of scatter. I put all of these disciplinary findings together. I established a set of 8 criteria drawn from anthropology, history, psychology, genetics, neurology, and I came up with a multiple theory of intelligence. For me, an intelligence is a potential to process information that comes in through your eyes or your ears or your hands so that you can solve problems or make things which are valued in at least one culture or community. That's the definition, but I think an analogy or metaphor works better. The traditional view of intelligence suggests we have a single mainframe computer inside our skull. And if that computer works well, you're smart in everything. If it works average, you're average in everything. If it works slowly, you're kind of dumb in everything. I believe we have several computers in our mind brain. Language computers, music computers, personal computers, and so on. And there are probably a few people where all the computers work well, a few people where none of the computers works well, but most of us are an amalgam, a combination of some computers that are quite good, some computers that are average, and some computers which don't work very well. That, in essence, is multiple intelligence theory. The first intelligence, linguistic intelligence, is the intelligence of the writer, the orator, the poet, the journalist, people who use language as their major activity. The second intelligence is logical mathematical intelligence. That's the intelligence of the mathematician or the scientist. Most intelligence tests only look at those two intelligences. And they're important for school, especially a Western secular school, as we had in Europe and then in the Americas in the 20th century. Whether it's appropriate for a digital school of the 21st century, nobody knows. If you're good in language and logic, you will succeed at most Western schools, and as long as you stay in school, you'll think you're smart. But if you should ever navigate the streets of Sao Paulo in an automobile, or you should ever try to survive in the Amazon, you will discover that there are other kinds of intelligence which are at least as important. Musical intelligence, the intelligence of performers, singers, composers, conductors. I understand now in Brazil there is a movement to get more young children able to play violin and other instruments. That's musical intelligence. A fourth intelligence is spatial intelligence, the intelligence that allows us to navigate wide space, like a sailor or an airplane pilot, or more local kinds of space, like a sculptor or chess player. My example of spatial intelligence is an architect, and I was delighted to learn that one of the world's most famous architects, Oscar Niemeyer, is still alive, over 100 years of age, and still working in Brazil. That gives us a lot of hope. A fifth kind of intelligence is bodily intelligence, the intelligence of the athlete, the dancer. Someone like Pele undoubtedly has a lot of bodily kinesthetic intelligence. It's also the intelligence of a craftsperson or a surgeon, people who use their whole bodies or parts of their bodies, like their hands or their mouth, to solve problems or to make things. Interpersonal intelligence is the intelligence of understanding other people. Obviously, it's important for leaders, teachers, clinicians, salespeople, people who are in religion, who have a congregation. All of those involve interpersonal intelligence. Some people call it social intelligence. A very interesting intelligence is intrapersonal intelligence, understanding of yourself. Having a good model of who you are, what your strengths are, what you're trying to achieve, what happens when something goes wrong. It's a very important intelligence. We don't know anything about how to teach it. An eighth intelligence, which I did not write about until 10 years ago, is the naturalist intelligence. It's the intelligence that allowed us to recognize the differences between plants, between animals, between rock formations, between clouds, the world of nature,